Well, good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started as many of you are already in, and we just welcome you. Happy Friday. Thank you for joining us today for our third event in our monthly child and adolescent professional development series, and are really excited for you to meet Jennifer today. And to hear the important information that she has to share. I'm Lori Kehoe. I'm a member of the outreach team at SunCloud Health. SunCloud Health provides integrated, nuanced treatment with residential, PHP, IOP, and virtual services for adults, and PHP and IOP for adolescents ages 12 to 17, focusing on treating the whole person, and we're located in Naperville, Northbrook, and Lincoln Park. If you're interested in learning more about our services, my contact information will be included in the last slide for your reference. And to make a referral, you can contact me directly, or you can call our intake number listed. I have met several of you in person, and I look forward to meeting the rest of you and sitting down and finding what your needs are in terms of the clients you serve or the students that you serve, and how I can best bring education to your school district free of charge. And also just to partner with you and to join with you in helping families navigate our behavioral health system. Please note that to receive your CE credit today, you will need to remain on Zoom for the entirety of the presentation. Also, you will receive an email just following our presentation today that includes a quiz and a survey. So please look for that email and complete it to receive your CE certificate by email. Jennifer Curtin, our expert speaker today, has worked in private practice and outpatient mental health with children, adolescents, adults, families, and couples. With a master's degree of science in clinical psychology and a focus on adolescence, she learned early on that identity, specifically gender and sexual identity, was part of the daily work of psychotherapy. Jennifer came out as queer and ADHD late in life and understands the challenges of both. Her passion for storytelling and writing provides a creative and engaging platform to deliver clinical information to people of all varieties and in all settings. Systems theory and equity in healthcare, workplaces, communities, and families drive her to create compelling educational and motivational presentations that engage and educate people from all walks of life. Jennifer has crafted presentations on a variety of topics spanning mental health, parenting, LGBTQ allyship, trans affirmative mental health care, supporting LGBTQIA affirming employers, and suicide prevention. Jennifer is currently a case therapist at Northwestern Behavioral Health in Sycamore, Illinois, and is excited to be bringing trans-affirming counseling and education to DeKalb County. In addition, Jennifer is an adjunct professor at Benedictine University teaching affirming mental health care for LGBTQIA clients. Some of Jennifer's previous clients are Amita, SunCloud Health, IADEP, Elmhurst Pride Collective, Alive Center Naperville, DeKalb County Board of Mental Health, and Youth Outlook. And now I present Jennifer Curtin.
Thank you so much, Lori, for that wonderful introduction. I really appreciate it. I didn't realize when I chose the date for this presentation just how critical it was going to be. And it is literally, I didn't even realize that we booked it the week of the election. So I feel like this is an incredibly important conversation to have right now and to help us all be aware of what's going on with the youth that we are working with in our various settings. What we're going to talk about today, and I'll just touch on a couple things about myself, is, everything that Lori said, I don't need to repeat, but I do want to make sure that it's really important that I acknowledge my privilege. I am a white cisgender woman, and that gives me more privilege than folks of color. That gives me more privilege, and as a professor and a clinician, in terms of education, in terms of my career, my role within the therapy room and outside as an educator. And I really want to make sure that it is noted that while I do have some minority identity, the majority of my identities are not minority identities. And I like to make sure that I start off from that space. I am not here to say that I am an expert on what it is to be within those identity and spaces, but I do like to use my voice and my privilege to elevate the needs and concerns and desires that will bring us to a more equitable place of educating and providing services for folks in minority communities. So for today, what I really think is important and so critical right now is for everybody to understand what minority stress is and how the current climate is affecting our LGBTQIA youth. I mean, at the end of the day, it's been affecting folks in my minority settings all the way from the beginning of time to now. But I really want to focus on some particular issues for the LGBTQ plus youth in Illinois schools and in a lot of the offices that you may see them as clinicians, and for parents and just community members to understand what's going on. One of the things that I'd really like to make sure that we're going to focus on today is outlining the supports and coping strategies that have been researched to help build resilience and to help people understand the difference between resilience and coping. But ultimately, what I'd like you to walk out of with here today is techniques to help kids understand how to adjust their emotional state to help them regulate and how that will in turn keep them on a path to resilience. So everything I'm sharing with you today can be implemented by anyone. If you're a teacher, a social worker, if you're a therapist, if you're a physician, if you're a layperson, any and all of these things should be able to be implemented. As we get to the end of the presentation and we're starting to talk about some of the techniques, we're going to have everybody separated into breakout rooms where you're going to be able to actually, as a group, do these things together so that you can see for yourself how to engage in the activities and ask questions so that when you leave the presentation, you're leaving with actual strategies and techniques that you can take into your settings. So I'm going to start off by just getting into minority stress and resilience. And for those who don't know, everything that I'm going to be sharing right now is coming from what we call the Meyer minority stress model. And that's what you're looking at with this visual. So what minority stress is it comes from the premise, which makes total sense, that if you are in a group that is the recipient of prejudice and stigma, you're going to have different and unique stressors than other folks. I think that this week has really shown the divide and the difference between folks that are coming from a minority stress lens and folks that are not. What's interesting about minority stress is that it isn't just a mental health issue, that these types of things, when we're talking about the distal and the proximal continuum of stressors, absolutely affect susceptibility to not only mental, but also physical illness. So when people are talking about feeling oppressed and stressed and it's making them feel ill, it's true. This is something that we look into and we identify at the hospital level to look at what are the biopsychosocial pieces of a client's life that would make them more susceptible to issues of public health. So let's talk about what distal and proximal continuum is. So what we're going to be talking about are the events and experiences outside of the individual that cause stress. Okay, those are the ones that are going to be occurring through personal interactions. And they're not just experienced, they're internalized. So what's happening on the outside is what's coming into the inside. So when we look at things that are distal, that are further out, these are usually things that we're seeing more on a structural level. Okay, this is where we're talking about things like prejudice, violence against certain communities, discrimination, social messages. This is going to include things like the law, what we see in media. This is going to be compounded by the amount of minority identities a person has and how intersectional a human being is. We're going to be looking at not just sexuality and gender, but looking at ability, looking at race and ethnicity. And the rule of thumb is the more minority status you have, the more intersectional identities you have, the higher level of minority stress that you're contending with. Okay. So we have that status and that identity that's going to come out. When we look at the things that are proximal, okay, it's when we take the distal, so the things that are on the outside of us, and we internalize them, what we then have is an internal expectation of rejection. It's what drives people to conceal who they are. It's what internalizes social messages. So when you're dealing with a child in a middle school or a high school that's walking down the hallways and is getting yelled at with slurs related to their minority identities, those things internalize and they lead people to feel shame. They lead people to feel that they are not okay, they are not enough, that they should be embarrassed or concealing who they are. And that is going to directly affect mental health outcomes for either positive or negative. What we know is we can offset that with things like coping and social support and having things that are displayed prominently, having folks that are representative of those identities in the places and the spaces that they live. So resilience and coping are two terms that I see people use very interrelatedly, and they're a little bit different. Resilience is an overall quality. It's that quality of being able to survive and thrive in the face of adversity. And I know over the years in working with LGBTQIA youth, I am just taken aback at the amount of resilience some of these kiddos have. That they have really learned and internalized through using coping skills or the actions and the efforts that they do in their spaces to increase flexibility and regulation and non-judgmental ways of being. They are prone to trying to find ways to build stronger relationships. When you have no discomfort in your life, you tend to have less resilience. So what we'll find is some of these kids may look on the outside like they are stronger or better prepared or more adept at coping. But that's what happens when you have no other choice. That's what happens when you have no other choice. When you're in a majority situation and everybody around you is like you and everything you're doing is approved and everywhere you go, you see things that match your identity and who you are, there's really not as much of a need for resilience. So what you might be seeing is kids that look on the outside like they're okay. So what affects resilience? We're going to look at this on an individual level and on a community level or on a larger structural level. Right now, you're going to see people feeling very non-resilient because changed laws and policies, what is being communicated by people of power and authority across media channels, when our values or the values of our country or where we live or the schools we go to don't match the values of minority folks, these are really difficult things to change. They're very difficult things to change. So the feelings of hopelessness, power, motivation are going to be lower when there are lowered community resilience, when there is lowered community resilience. What that affects are the things that also build resilience in the way of mastery. So if you are in a school setting, you might be seeing kiddos right now that are not performing as well as they normally would. You may not be seeing a lot of coherence within your settings or within your communities and neighborhoods. And everybody right now, and I like that they use the word hardiness because it makes me think of plants. And right now, the way I would describe the way I felt from the outcome of the election is I feel like a kind of like a limp plant. Like I'm not dead. I'm still going, but I'm just not nearly as hardy as I've been. So what we need to look for is what are the tangible resources and what are the things that we can do within our vicinity, right? Within our communities, whether that be school communities, whether that be neighborhood, whether that be family communities or friendship communities or clinical communities to help affect anything we can that are going to increase feelings of hope, resource, help build skills, and help people feel like they do still have power. So right now, one of the things I'm encouraging parents of my clients to do is turn down their exposure to media. There's a lot of folks in social media right now that are expressing a lot of feelings about what has happened. It's not that it's a bad thing to do, but when you are surrounding somebody with messages of powerlessness and helplessness in the face of lowered community resilience, that's when we can start seeing things really take a turn for the worse in our kids. So limiting access is something we all need to be thinking about. What are we exposing ourselves to? And what messages are we translating and sending out there that might be further diminishing the resilience within our communities? So the Trevor Project does biannual research, and they look at what is influencing the LGBTQ youth community in a bunch of different settings. One of the things that I really, really love is that they spend a lot of time looking at the school climate and the home climate. And I'm sure it will be of no surprise to you that when we have youth that have supportive families and schools, that increases resilience. Okay. And so what we're looking at here are BRS scores, which are what help us to understand how many folks and at what percentages we're looking at that have higher levels of resilience versus lower levels of resilience. So it's a very simple concept. The lower the anxiety, the lower the depression, the lower the suicidality in somebody, it corresponds to higher resilience. So we see this already in statistics regarding suicidality in the LGBTQIA community, that trans folks, non-binary folks, have a 8 times higher chance of suicidal ideation that can be reduced 80% by supportive adults and school communities. So when we're sitting around feeling like we, as the adults in these children's lives, don't have anything we can do to affect change, that is absolutely incorrect. We do have the power to help build resilience by being supportive. And we then in turn have the ability to help keep more kids alive by providing that continuity of support. So this is why community education is so important, right? For parents and lay people to understand that it's not about belief systems. It's about showing up and letting kids know that they're supported and safe, regardless of what's going on around them on the bigger stage of community resilience. When we look at the broader transgender population, the last generalizable study, longitudinal study that was fielded was the US Trans study in 2015, and they have refielded the study, and the results of that study should be coming out within the year. But back when they first fielded the study, there were a there were 60% of folks that were out to their immediate family, the people they grew up with, that said that families were generally supportive. Okay. So that there was a majority of folks that were reporting in that survey that they had good family support. Okay. When we look at those who did not, okay, so we're looking at folks that are in those ranges of either 18% of being unsupported or 22% of being neither supportive or unsupportive, they were going to have a higher rate of negative experiences related to economic stability and health. We know when kids are turned out by families because of their identities, there will be a higher rate of experienced homelessness. We know when they are not supported by their families, there's a higher rate of attempted suicide. And we know that these are the kids that are experiencing the highest amounts of psychological distress. So when you're coming into contact with kids that are coming into your settings as recently hospitalized or multiple attempts, they have LGBTQIA identities, they may have multiple minority identities. We need to kind of put together the pieces of what are the influential factors in these kiddos' lives that are contributing to these rates of negative experiences, and how to help them understand where they can find the supports that they need. So we talked about this a couple slides back, that intersectionality matters. Minority stress is additive, okay? The more minority identities a person has, the higher likelihood that person's going to have of experienced stress. So right now, as you're looking around you and you're working amongst folks that are in the Black and Brown community, that may also have a minority sexual identity or gender identity, right? So we know that right now there's been a lot of stress that's been placed on Black women to help us fight for the rights of everybody. There's a lot of stress. There's a lot of fatigue. There's a lot of feeling like we've done our part and there's nothing more we can do. Okay. So it's additive. You add the number of intersections, that stress becomes super unique. Okay. Because there are larger distal factors that are going to be outside the majority, this large group of people, and also within the minority group. So we look at folks that are Black trans women. Black trans women are the minority group of the highest rate of violent crime and murder. And it's not just white, cisgender, heterosexual folks that are perpetrating those things. There's also minority stress within group, within the LGBTQ community, within the African American community. So you're contending now with negative influences, not just in majority groups, but also within their smaller minority communities. And if you think about that and we add religion to that, just think about just how displaced a child can feel in a multiple intersectional identity situation. Because when we have in-group marginalization, the proximal factors are much more severe. When you don't have the safety and security of your racial community behind you, first, not only do you feel an utter loss of that part of your identity, but you are at higher risk. It affects acceptance of family. It affects folks' feelings of safety to come out. And what I see a lot in my office are conflict of allegiances. So when we talk about things like, who do I need to be loyal to? What's more important, my Black identity or my queer identity? What's more important, my Muslim identity or my gay identity? There's a conflict. This happens a lot across race, ethnicity, and religion when it comes to LGBTQIA kiddos. So it's not as simple as it sounds. It's not just, oh, I've got a queer kid or a trans kid that's obviously stressed out right now because what has happened. There are many layers to this, and it's important that we are able to identify that not all LGBTQ youth are facing and experiencing the same levels of minority stress. So let's talk about changes in the environment. And I'll be honest with you, I wrote this presentation before the outcome of the election. So a lot of what we're talking about is going to be things that have been happening since the 2016 election all the way up through now. I am trying very hard to stay positive and not address things that have not yet happened. But I'm also very realistic about the fact that things like Project 2025 have people in very much higher rates of minority stress and fear. But I do want to kind of paint the picture of how this has been progressing and what are things that are actually different in our country in the last, 10 years that maybe that differ from things that were happening just prior, and what the differences between mobilization, politics, and law really are. So when we look at things, we are not making false assumptions about potential safety. So one of the craziest things, and I just never can wrap my head around this, is that the support for equal rights in this country are extremely high. Okay. We don't vote for that necessarily. We will believe that. People will say things, you'll hear people say things all the time. I'm fine with people that are LGBTQ. I support for them to have rights. Okay. 84% of non-LGBTQ people agree. But at the same time, discrimination is rising. And so we are looking at GLAAD, who is tracking a wave of anti-LGBTQ protests and threats. And what we are looking at is even if 91% of folks agree that LGBTQ people should have the freedom to live their life and not be discriminated against, 66% of them agree that anti-LGBTQ bills and legislation at the state level are going to lead to increased discrimination and violence. Okay, so when people say things like decentralization of government is a good thing, and that's probably going to help people a whole lot more, that is not what the research is tracking and showing. We also need to be aware that in 2023, there was an all-time high of over 500 anti-LGBTQ bills proposed. Okay, all-time high, and it's building. Our kids are exposed to this. TikTok is filled with information of this level. Social media is bursting with videos. First thing I saw the day after the election was someone posting a photo of white male students at a Texas university picketing with signs that said, homosexual love is disgusting. Women belong to men. So it's the exposure that these kids are getting, and the online hate is at an all-time high. Okay, so the more online hate there is, that translates into higher levels of violence. I think we can all agree, whether or not it can be proven, that there is online bullying that goes on in the youth community, regardless of identity. But that is a lot bigger now for minority stressed LGBTQIA youth. Okay, so when there is like for 2022, okay, GLAAD's tracked over 160 incidences of anti-LGBTQ protests and threats. Okay, most of which have been targeting drag events, and that uptick began in Pride season of 2022 and continued through the midterm election cycle. Okay, there's been a lot of false rhetoric, specifically around transgender healthcare. So there is a lot of fear around escalation, and that fear is legitimate. So when policies change and politics change, hostility changes. Okay. So the ACLED, which is the leading source of political violence and protest activity across the world, has tracked that anti-LGBTQ mobilization is on the rise in the US. And these are demonstrations, political violence, offline propaganda. So you might see flyers from time to time put on windshields. You might have heard of situations where groups like the Proud Boys will show up at a drag brunch that is marketed towards families, and they're armed. So what we're really looking at is not the way people are thinking and their views that they have about this minority population. It's about the actions. And so as hostility increases, this is distal, right? We can't necessarily always contain it. And when we look at our Constitution, it somewhat protects it. But we need to be aware that our kids are immersed in information about this. So when we look at our anti-LGBTQ policy changes, and this has probably changed, this comes from the HRC. When you're looking at the dark green states, those are the ones that have the highest overall policies to support. So we can see that Illinois is in there. The red states are showing the highest level of negative policies. And I have clients that have used these maps and looked at these maps and said, great, I can live on the coasts. I can't go on vacation to Florida. I can't go on vacation to the Carolinas. I'm not safe in the largest percentage of the states in the union. And when kids say that, we can't say, no, that's not true. It can be true. It is true in certain places. It is true in a state like Florida where you can't use the bathroom that corresponds with your gender identity. So when we talk about this from a therapeutic lens, using cognitive behavioral therapy with folks that are dealing with real internalized minority stress doesn't work. We can't say, well, what are the chances if you go to Texas that something negative is going to happen to you? Because we don't know. And we know it could be generally high, right? Depending on where you are. Now, this is not an all or none proposition. There are folks all over our country and in all of these states who live in intersectional minority identities, right? But the threats are now real. They can be seen. They're being tracked. So we need to be aware of the fact that the information is going to increase the level of stress. The other piece of this is that from an anti-bullying perspective, the only states that are really addressing bullying based on sexual orientation or gender identity are the ones that are shown in light blue, which they pretty much correspond also to those states that have high levels of protective policies. The gray states are states without any protections. The majority of our states have no protection. And there are a couple of states that are specifically preventing districts from protecting LGBTQ students. And right as of the time of this update, which was in June of 2023, that was inclusive of Missouri and South Dakota. Interestingly enough, there are states explicitly addressing discrimination against LGBTQ elementary and high school students. But this is also a map that indicates state laws that prohibit discrimination against students in public education on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity. So this is schools in general to the left. On the right, we're talking about public education, okay? So again, the dark blue states are the ones that are most explicitly addressing those states. The black don't do anything at all. Okay, so I want to make sure that people understand that when there is bullying in schools and it's allowed, it flourishes. And there is an emboldening that can happen when we have people in positions of privilege and power that are modeling that kind of bullying. So it's difficult when I have a client that comes into my office yesterday and says, so what I'm understanding is Our country thinks it's okay to bully LGBTQ people. And we have to start to address this, right? I can't say, no, 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 that's not true. I have to say, tell me more. I have to ask, tell me more about how you feel about this and where and what you're noticing. And there's validation that needs to happen. To feel seen and for someone to believe that you're truly an ally and there to help, you have to validate. The states that you see in yellow here are anti-conversion therapy, and the states in black are not. So there's a real potential that there will be more and more gay and trans youth that are subjected to conversion therapy. And luckily, we live in a state in Illinois that this is banned. But to utilize an intersection of religion and psychology on the premises of helping people turn away from these identities has proven over and over to increase suicidality in folks. So it's not a pretty picture for somebody who is young and growing up as a LGBTQIA person who might be old enough, a college student, to remember when marriage equality passed and where things were looking a little bit more positive. So it's that perception and reality coming together that is really going to affect the level of minority stress. Okay. In the most recent Listen study, and they are the organization that tracks trends related to LGBTQIA students in educational settings. Okay. That in 2021, there was quite a few folks that would miss school and that were not attending just because they felt unsafe or uncomfortable. And that the frequency of victimization it's coming down overall since 2001, right? But when we look at it from a gender perspective, there is a bit of an uptick. So we have to be careful to understand that hostile school climates affect academic success and mental health. Okay. And so even though the climate's improving overall since the first installment of the survey in 99, there's still a decent amount of hostility in schools. So sometimes saying things get better, things are getting better, it doesn't really matter to somebody who's still enduring it, even though the facts are true. You know, it's not nearly as bad as it was back in the early 2000s. So overall, when we look at increased mobilization, less protection, policy repeal, hostile school climate, and constant media, the minority stress of youth is so overwhelming right now that resilience is getting lower and lower. And all of us may be in a situation where trying to find ways to help people cope seems impossible. And here's what I'm going to say: if you are not if you are not a person of an LGBTQIA identity, whether or not you have other minority identities, to be aware that acknowledging this is a perfect way to let a kiddo know, I understand you, I see what you're dealing with. Okay. And that there isn't a whole lot wrong to say other than invalidation and trying to minimize. Right now is not a time to minimize, but it is a time for us to help teach them how to respond in a healthy way. So let's talk a little bit about the keys to building resilience individually and from a community perspective, okay? And we talked about this before. Right now, the idea of changing politics, changing the media, and changing discriminatory law doesn't sound, it's difficult to change and it doesn't look good. But that doesn't mean that we can't do anything. It doesn't mean that we're dead where we're sitting. It doesn't mean that there's no hope, because the proximal area is within reach. And this is why we want to really make sure that we're shoring up home support, community support, school support, and affirming care. Our governor has put out some messaging around the fact that everything in our state that is in place right now to ensure safe support and affirming care for our LGBTQIA citizens is not going anywhere, and it won't go anywhere until it's forced. And if it's forced, that we will fight. So we are in a good situation as Illinoisans. There are good supports. And it may not look real different from a day-to-day perspective, but what we really have to be careful about is the way that people are treating one another, where there's a lack of kindness, where there is an uptick in bullying, where there are situations with where kids that are not affected by minority stress to the degree that some of our LGBTQIA youth are facing, where being told to settle down or not be a crybaby or well your candidate lost, boo-hoo, isn't helpful, right? Because there are other things at hand here that are real for people in these communities. So let's talk about how we build resilience. And I think it's no surprise to anyone here that it's about relationships. Human beings, we rely on relational um, experiences to help keep us healthy mentally, physically. It's a basic need. It's a Maslow's hierarchy bottom of the triangle type need. So when we can help kids accept themselves and regulate themselves, give them safe spaces for expression, and advocate for them, it models to them how to do it for themselves. And that's what we want. We want kids to understand that, yes, there's lots of things in this world we cannot control, but you can control yourself. You can control the way that you see yourself, the way you speak up for yourself, the way that you express yourself. Now, of course, we have to do that within a safe space, right? So we have to also look at how that is affected by what the family climate looks like. Right now, I'm dealing with a lot of trans teenagers that are having a really difficult time feeling accepted at home, knowing family members voted in a way that has diminished their ability to get access to healthcare. Okay, so education for people who are supporting LGBTQ youth is on us. Okay, helping kids to understand that even though there are people with differences in this world, that you are unconditionally loved and supported. We need to understand what it feels like from their first person experience instead of trying to get them to tamp it down or reframe it in a different way. Let them have that space to come in and process. At schools, and I think we do an excellent job of this in the greater Chicagoland area, especially, of having gay straight alliances and having wonderful faculty that will sponsor those groups and be present, helping to support adoption of gender congruent names and pronouns, and having supportive policies and inclusive curriculum. But what we really have to be focused on is the bullying. Because I will tell you over and over again, that's what the kids come in and talk about, is that I'm getting bullied, people are screaming slurs at me, and nobody is stepping in. The other thing we want to do is we want to lift up community organizations that are supporting our youth. And Youth Outlook has been around since 1998. They're across, I believe, now 7 different counties in the greater Chicagoland area and out west. They have folks that help navigate healthcare and mental health systems. And it's a place where you're going to find adults and allies and family members and other kids that understand what's going on. So the more we can link kids to supports and partner them with people in places that will contribute to their feelings of acceptance and regulation, the more that resilience is going to build. So what we need them to know is, first and foremost, to understand where are safe places in people. Understand the cues that your body is telling you that is going to put you in a dangerous situation. So that's what we're going to kind of move into now, is going into some of recommendations and some of the things we want to implement to help people to know what in fact they should be looking out for. So we talked about validation. We've talked about identification of policies for students. We've looked at looking and listening for bullying, but also really get some more professional development and make sure that we're looking at things like equal access to facilities and curriculum. Make sure that there is visibility. So let's talk about the physiology piece of this. So we have a brain that has a 3-level autonomic nervous system. Okay, so when we're talking about the place where we go from calm to fight or flight, or from fight or flight to shutdown. Okay, this is all part of the polyvagal nerve system. So this is a giant nerve system that connects our brain to our major organs, that responds to cues like sight, smell, seeing, and memory that will trigger a response that will activate a state change. And that is from being calm, where we call ventral vagus, where you can talk calmly, you feel safe, you can learn, you can socialize, to the sympathetic nervous system that we are all very used to understanding and seeing, which is fight or flight. And then also on the other side of it, the dorsal vagal, which is where we're going to see people that are grief, numb, in denial, that are stuck, that look flat. Okay. And so part of this is for you to understand how to see and identify in your kids where they are. This is going to happen through something called neuroception, which is basically asking questions internally like, what can I learn? Am I loved? Am I safe? It's kind of our gut feeling that processes and assesses risk. And it's going on every single day and every moment of our lives as human beings that are built to stay alive. So when we're going to work with stressed kids, what we want to teach them is to identify what we call the window of tolerance. And you can see in this image, the window of tolerance, if you're looking through, is a beautiful beach with a palm tree and big white fluffy clouds. And it's that space where you can deal with whatever's happening in your life. You might feel a little stress or a little pressure, but it's not really a bad place to be. And it's where we can grow and learn and relate. But when we start to see this window close, you're either going to see us go to a place of hyperarousal, and that's where we see the volcano erupting, anxious, angry, out of control, overwhelmed. Your body wants to fight or run away, and it's not something that is chosen. So when these kids are angry, they're not choosing it. It's a reaction that takes over. And the same thing with hypoarousal, spacey, zoned out, numb, frozen, sleeping. Your body wants to shut down. So for them to understand that these aren't conscious choices, this is the way that your body is adapting to the cues in the environment. But we can help change those states. We can introduce cues and use interventions that will help them regulate. So we are trying to expand the window of tolerance. You, as a therapist, teacher, and adult, are a co-regulator. Okay. You're helping them with learn skills. You're helping them set limits. You're helping them by providing a warm relationship. And we want that to continue because what minority stress triggers is what we call biological rudeness. So what that means is that safe cues can actually be perceived as unsafe. You can be attracting all the safe cues in your space. You can have safe space placards. You can be approaching people and checking in with them. And you might notice that you're getting strange responses from kids that are dealing with a lot of minority stress. They might be irritable or visibly anxious the more calmly you approach them. They might be spaced out or tense. So what you need to say is, I'm trying to approach you in a calm way. And I'm trying to let you know you're safe, but I also understand that your body's telling you something different right now, instead of taking it personally. So what we're going to talk about really quick is mapping, attending, and befriending. And just because I'm looking at time and we've got about 10 minutes left, we're going to do one of these together. And then I'm just going to talk through how to continue with the rest of them just to make sure we cover everything. So when we start with mapping, what we're trying to help kids do is create what we call the personal profile map. And we want them to understand what it means for them in their world and for them in their body to feel calm, fight or flight, or shut down. So what I want everyone to do, and we don't even have to go into the breakout rooms right now, is I want you to just take 2 minutes right now and think about when you're in a calm state, how would you describe the world? The world is ... And how would you describe how you are? I am dot, dot, dot. We do this with kids also in fight or flight. Okay. When you're totally stressed out, what does the world seem like to you? How do you feel you are? And when you're shut down, what does the world look like? And how are you?
I
And
do
if you,
apologize, Holly. I think we're going to have to go on. If you want to write it in the chat, I can see the chat.
oh, I see it.
Oh,
That's
good.
okay.
Oh,
The world
great.
is safe
It's
and
on
I
you.
am happy. Thank you, Holly. She did it.
You're welcome.
Okay, wonderful. The world is safe and I'm happy. Is there anybody that could quickly put in the chat what the world feels like and what they feel like when they are in stress mode and fight or flight? And we'll just look for chat. That will make it easier. We won't have to worry about any kind of um, voice, anything. I don't know. I'm not a very techie person, so. Okay, so I see in the chat when I'm someone did a good one with shut down. When I'm shut down, the world looks scary and I don't have a way out. When I'm calm, I see the world as a hopeful place. That's wonderful, Laura. Perfect. This is exactly it. When I'm stressed out, the world is chaotic and I'm high energy. This is amazing. So you guys are doing it. It's really a very easy thing to help a kid explain to help explain to a kid, and you can do it really really quickly. What we want to do with that then is we want to add to it what we call glimmers and triggers. Okay, glimmers are moments of connection and safety, and triggers occur when your vagal brake can't relax and you're feeling that you're stressed. There's a threat in your situation. So then we go from who am I to how I respond. So if we're going to go back to Holly and Holly feels happy and the world's all good, how does she respond? Okay. Does she feel like staying home? Does she feel um, like meditating? Does she feel grateful? Right? When somebody's in fight or flight, the headline might be like, I feel disrespected. Okay. And what are the things that make you want to run away when I feel interrupted, when my coworkers don't say hello, right? When I'm feeling that things are wrong in my life, when I notice what's wrong, when I get a bad grade, when someone yells at me or calls me a name. Okay. And then what moves me to safety? When I hear my favorite song, when I see my friend at the lunch table and they're waving at me, you know, um, when I get home and my dog greets me and licks my face after a terrible day. If you experience things like that, you know that even when you're in that, I'm feeling disrespected or I'm feeling sad place, there's this glimmer that you can identify that in that moment, it changes the whole thing. I mean, when I woke up that morning after the election, I'm gonna tell you right now, I was feeling flight. I don't want to go to work. I don't want to leave my house. No, I do want to leave my house. I want to leave the country. No, I can't feel anything but feeling upset. And I hopped out of bed and my dog came bounding at me and she came and sat next to me on my couch and she licked my face and she nuzzled into me. And in that moment, I felt like all was good in the world. So helping people understand that, yeah, we get how you're responding. We get you're fighting right now with somebody in the hallway. Okay, but let's come into my office or let's go home and let's talk about what's going to change that. What's going to move you towards safety? What are the tangibles? And then what we're going to look at is what can I do on my own that's going to help me stay in a safe space? And what can I do with other people? Okay, so often what we'll do, and this is something post-election I'm seeing a lot of, is what am I going to do on my own? I'm going to make a list of all the things I'm grateful for. I'm going to make a list of all of the organizations I can help out. I'm going to lean into our history and recognize that there are people on this earth that have been through more oppression and more distal abandonment than we are right now. And I'm going to learn about them, and I'm going to learn about these cultures and how they've persisted. How can I do things with others? I'm going to go to GSA this week. Um, my teacher is giving us a time to process how we're feeling. I'm going to go play sports or go to an art meeting. So what we really want to make sure we're focusing on is what moves me in to these different spaces and what moves me out. Okay. Because the thing here is we feel in the moment when we are activated that we are not in control of our bodies. But the reality is that we can be. And anyone who has told anybody to breathe when they're stressed out, okay, the initial response you get is, I am breathing. But when you sit with them and you do belly breathing and you do that 4 square breathing where you breathe in 4 and you hold it and you let it out and you do it for about 10 repetitions, tell me you don't move back into that ventral vagal space. What we need to be able to do is help people get there. Asking these questions is all you need. You don't need a worksheet. You don't need a book. You just need to ask the questions. How do you feel right now? What would be the headline? I'm angry. Okay. And when you're feeling like this, tell me how you see the world and tell me how you see yourself. It's a lot better than saying, tell me more about your feelings, right? And then to help them identify what helps you get out of that. What are things, no matter how you're feeling, that'll put you in a good place? One of the things that I really help kids to do is art mapping. So they can create their own map and they can use colors and they can use images and they can use illustrations. But one thing that kids can do, and they can do it between every passing period, are musical maps. Have a playlist. What's your I need to get pumped up playlist? What's your I need to mellow out playlist? Okay. Bring curiosity to their daily experiences. Ask them to get curious. How do I move towards safety and how do I move away? When I shut down and I push everybody away, what can I do to get to a space that feels more safe? What is something that I can do? So we want to get them to understand that their body state is totally different than their ingrained familiar internal stories. Okay. That even though you're thinking to yourself, I don't have any place on this earth as a trans person, that they still have the ability to change their autonomic state separately to try to achieve a place of calm. And that's powerful. What we want to do is always be sure that we're honoring our systems, okay? That these techniques honor the body. This is a body thing. This is not a judgment thing. This is not a thinking thing. This is a body thing. And what we're noticing in research now on polyvagal theory and polyvagal and action in therapy is that this is effectively helping us manage neurotransmission in a way that we typically rely on medication. And when people are in calm state together, it can create a ripple effect. So we can create a situation where we are creating a ripple effect of hate, a ripple effect of anger, or a ripple effect of calm connectedness. So bringing these exercises into your classrooms, your group, your therapy, your home, the dinner table, can really turn minority stress into opportunities for resilience and growth. I want to thank you all for coming. I knew this was going to be tough to make it an hour. I usually do this presentation in 2 hours. I have included my email here. I will make sure that I let the folks at SunCloud know that you are welcome to this presentation. I do ask that you respect the fact that it is copywritten, but you are welcome to have it so you have access to these things. The other thing I'm going to say to you is a lot of the exercises you can find in a book that's called The Polyvagal Theory and Therapy by a woman named Deb Dana. And there are even more ideas for things you can bring into your practice or your classroom. And if you have ongoing questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to me via email and I will get back to you. I really appreciate everybody attending and participating today.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. This has been empowering and powerful, and we just so appreciate you taking the time to do this for us. To the audience, most of you have my email. If there's anything else that you need, please reach out to us. Thank you all. Happy Friday. Take care,
Happy
everybody.
Friday.